Governor Ron Desantis.
Thank you. Oh, please be seated. Thank you. Thank you so much. It's always tough to slum it at the Breakers. Probably one of the best spots that we have, not only in Florida, but anywhere in the country. And, the Republican governors did theirs in Boca Raton. Great place and everything. But anytime anyone does anything in this part of the world that's not here, I always wonder, why aren't you doing it at the Breakers? Because it's so good. It's great to be here. We have, we're waiting. My wife is due to have our third child in March. So we'll have, at that point, 3 kids, 3 years of age or under, running around the governor's mansion. So we're working on transitioning from man-to-man to zone defense. It will be, our lives are hectic, but I would say it's kind of a controlled chaos. And I think we'll be going from controlled chaos to just outright bedlam. So we'll see how we handle it, but we're looking forward to doing it. And we actually had my kids in the office this morning because we lit the Christmas tree in the foyer of the governor's office at the state capitol. So they have the lights on. And so my daughter, she was 3, she pushed the button, lit everything up and was real happy. But before that, my kids are running around my office, and in my desk, I have a button that says no. And if you press it, it will say no, 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 because people always come and ask you for this, for that, for that. No, no, no. Well, my son got into that, and so now he's no, no, no on everything that he's doing. So hopefully that means that when he becomes old enough to vote, he will be opposed to pork barrel projects and some of the other stuff that doesn't look after taxpayer dollars well. I think we got a lot of good things going on in Florida. It's interesting. This weekend, we're doing the big state Republican Party fundraiser, which is going to be down in Turnberry Isle in Aventura. Normally, we do it at Disney World because they're very good with help with the facilities, but they have their big Star Wars ride that's opening. And it's an interesting fact that they started doing the exact same thing at Disneyland in California at the exact same time. And yet ours here in Florida is going to open 6 weeks earlier at least. And the reason for that is because of a bad economic and regulatory climate. Because everything else is the same, but there's just no way they could have done it as soon as they could here. And I just thought that was interesting. I mean, it just shows you that the policies really, really matter. I like to tell people that, we did a budget last year, signed into law that was just under $91 billion. New York State has less people now than Florida, and yet their budget is twice the size, roughly twice the size of the budget of the state of Florida. But if you look at their infrastructure, their roads, I mean, some of these roads are horrific. Like, it's not only that they're bad, it's like I get motion sickness, driving on some of these things. And so all this money, where does it go? What services? And really just that hardworking taxpayer just keeps getting beat on, the small business owner, and you name it. Florida's budget is actually less than the budget of just New York City alone. And that's saying something as well. But I think what we've been able to do is, do it the right way. I unveiled my budget for the next fiscal year about a week or 2 ago now, and our budget will be in line with what we've done previously. In fact, even though the budget top line's higher, when you count that Florida's had so much population growth, it's actually a net reduction in per capita spending in the state. Even while doing a net reduction in spending, we're still continuing to reduce taxes. We're continuing with our historic support for environmental restoration and water quality and water resources projects. And we're doing the biggest initiative for teacher compensation, certainly in the last 20, 30 years, but maybe in all of Florida's history. I mean, you'd have to go back very far to try to find anything comparable. And I think what that shows you is that when you foster a good economic climate, when you maintain low tax rates, and obviously when it comes to income, no tax rate at all, what you do is that, you can attract more investment. We live in a very highly mobile society. It is not that difficult to pick up and move and decide to invest in other places. much more difficult proposition 100 years ago, even 50 years ago. Well, now that's something that happens every single day. And so by us maintaining good policies, having a healthy fiscal state, we've been able to expand the economic base. And so even with a low tax burden, we're showing that we're able to meet the needs of the public when it comes to environment, education, infrastructure, all these different things that really affect people's quality of life. On the flip side of that, if you look at some of the states that have gone in different directions, it seems that they can never raise taxes enough to kind of square the circle of what they're trying to do, because they overextend themselves, even with the high taxes, that never can catch up with the amount of spending that they're doing. And so then they go back to the well, but when they go back to the well with even higher taxes, they deplete their own economic base because people change their behavior, people move, people invest other places. And so they end up trying to wring out more and more tax revenue from a smaller and smaller base. And as we see in some states, that just can't possibly work, like Illinois, Connecticut. Then you, of course, have New York and California, which typically have done that for years and years. So, and it's interesting. I look back in the election of 1960, the Electoral College, Florida had 10 votes in the Electoral College in the presidential election. New York had 45 Electoral College votes. After the next reapportionment, which will happen in 2020, so it won't be for this election, but the next presidential election in the next decade, Florida will likely have 31 electoral votes, and New York will have maybe as little as 26 or 27 electoral votes. So from 45 to 10 to 31, 27 is what you've seen over a relatively short period of time, I would say, for that significant movement. And I think you're going to see the states that lose seats in the House will almost all be states that have enacted policies that haven't been fiscally responsible. And even California, I think, they're certainly not going to gain seats. They may lose seats. That's probably the first time that's ever happened in California since it became a state, I would imagine. And so that just shows you how this works. But we're in a situation where we've been able to outgrow the rest of the country in terms of our pace. Private sector job growth has been stronger. And so that really is, I think, where we're trying to be. We went over some of this stuff today at our cabinet meeting with kind of our, the debt and our pension, all this stuff. And, we're in good shape on all that. But the point was made, and I think is good, is that, economies are cyclical. That's just the nature of it. When the economy went down last time, we were below where the national average was on a lot of this stuff. And if, the economies at some point will correct, I don't know if it's going to happen tomorrow, 3 years, whatever, but eventually that's just how it works. But if we can maintain ourselves as doing better than the rest of the country, I think we're in a much better position to be able to withstand and really even perhaps thrive on the back end. And one of those, Texas, if you remember in the 08, 09, Texas really didn't have very much of a downturn. They did. Obviously, there's no way you could escape it, but they bounced back very quickly. And I think it's because they had a really good underlying policies in place. Obviously, they have some good things in their economy going for them. So I'd like us to be in that situation going forward. And I think that we can do that. Part of that is the fiscal. We're doing some stuff, even though our pension system is one of the top, I think, 15 in the country in terms of being funded. We're doing things to shore that up even more, which I think is the responsible thing to do. And that involves doing things like reducing some of the assumptions about rate of return. We want to lower that down to make it more realistic and something that's more achievable. So you're not putting all your eggs in the basket there. We're increasing. My budget increases the amount of money we have in reserves. So we'll have over $5.6 billion in total reserves under my budget. We have about $5.4 billion now. So that's going in a good direction to continue to shore us up in those respects. Obviously, we're going to maintain a favorable tax climate, favorable business regulations. The one thing that I think we've been really struggling with over the years, we're doing a lot better now, is with our legal climate. Part of that was driven by the courts. I mean, we had situations where the legislature was enacting common sense reforms, whether it's medical liability, whether it's you name it. Those would go up, and the Supreme Court would basically rewrite it, not because there was anything legally defective by it, but because they just personally disagreed with the direction that was going. And you saw that in other areas as well, school choice and what have you. I was fortunate to come in and have an opportunity to replace, 3 of those liberal justices who really would rewrite law. And I put 3 constitutionalists on the court who understand the proper role of the court is to apply the law, not to rewrite the law, not to rewrite the Constitution, but to simply enforce what it says. And I think that's made a world of difference, because if we're in a situation now where we're signing reforms like we signed this assignment of benefits reform, that is not going to get overturned by the Supreme Court. I mean, it's a basic policy choice, and those policy choices are going to be upheld. And so that's a very, very good thing. We did so good on that of the 3 people I put on the Supreme Court in Florida, 2 of them are already up to higher office. So they've been nominated by President Trump, confirmed by the Senate, and I believe both of them have formally been appointed and their commission signed to be on the federal 11th Circuit Court of Appeals for the federal appeals court. So that's a big, big deal. And but I think it's a testament that these were really, really solid jurists. So what's going to happen now is there's a whole process here in Florida that's going on. We do nominating commissions. We don't do Senate approval. So there's a whole application process. There'll be a list of names that get certified and then presented to me. And then this will probably be sometime in maybe January, where I'll be able to have a list and then look and pick 2 names on the list to succeed our recently departed justices. So if I do those picks in January, that will mean that within basically 1 year, I will have made 5 appointments to the Supreme Court. Jeb Bush and Rick Scott were in for a total of 16 years combined, and they did a total of 3 appointments to the Supreme Court. So it's like, these things just come or they don't. So that's where we are with that. But I really feel that the legal system here is much improved as a result of that. I think you'll continue to see improvements. Obviously, there's things you need to do legislatively, but when we're ranked as one of the worst places for litigation, that's like a tax like anything else. And so we can sit here and tell people we have such a good business climate, lower taxes, come here. But if they see that, that may not be something that they want to do. And there's other states like California you think would be worse. They're not. I mean, they're more reasonable in many respects on litigation than we've been, if you look at kind of how the different choices that they've made. So, but I think the courts have been very, very important. So I think the climate is good. But when I go around and talk to folks, particularly in other states, about coming to Florida, I don't really talk about the taxes because I think people know that. I don't really talk about the business climate because I think people know that too. I do talk about the changes in the courts and how we're on a better track there. But the main thing I stress is Florida's commitment to workforce and to education, really at all levels. Our university system here has been ranked for the 3rd year in a row the #1 public university system in the United States by U.S. News and World Report. That's So, for example, Florida State is ranked number 18 in terms of public universities. They are not ranked that high in football this year. And so you go back 20 years when I was a kid, or 25, no one would have said that Florida State would be ranked higher in academics than football. But I think it's been a testament to how much, we've seen improvement. And I think now people are starting to figure it out, but I think a lot of people really, particularly in other states, they don't have any clue as to the improvements that have been made. But I think that's really, really significant, because as people look to invest, they want to make sure that they have a talented workforce. And you look at the different areas of opportunities here. Just look what's going on with space over in like Cape Canaveral and all that area. I mean, you have companies coming in, they're building things there now. So, I mean, you have a need from engineers and scientists all the way down to people, who do manufacturing. And so it's important. Part of that also, and by the way, I mean, I think that we've had a lot of good leadership in terms of the trustees, the board of governors, the university presidents. I mean, John Thrasher at FSU has done a great job, and others have done a great job. UF President Fox has done a good job. So that's important. But it's also, we've tried to say, the purpose of these universities should be academic rigor and excellence, not political stuff. So when I came in, we got all the university presidents to sign the statement of free speech principles that's used at the University of Chicago, which is the gold standard. So, no safe spaces, no any of this, but really have robust First Amendment across all aspects of the university. And I think that's very, very important, because as some of these other universities have become, more interested in kind of the politics and the activism, I think that the academic offerings become more mushy, and what you don't want is people graduating with a degree that's not worth very much. We see that certainly throughout the country. We don't want to see that with any of our universities here. So I think they've done a good job of trying to stay on the road to academic excellence. We also, though, recognize that going to a 4-year brick and ivy university, that may be one way that you can be successful, but it's not the only way you can be successful. And it's not the best way for many students to eventually succeed. So we've really stressed workforce education, career education, in conjunction with our state college system, but also things like apprenticeships, where people are getting skills and being able to go directly into the workforce. You're starting to see, partially because of our efforts, but also partially because you've, I think, seen even at the county level recognition of students graduating high school with certifications in different skilled trades, whether it's HVAC, electrical, all these other things. You're not going to be able to write code and have a robot fix your sink or things like that. So these are things that people can do well on. They can make a pretty good living right on, and they can eventually go into business for themselves if they want to. So giving those avenues, I think, is good. And if I have a choice between, if one path would lead a student to go to college for 6 years, go deep into debt, either not get the degree or get a degree in like zombie studies, which isn't worth it, versus getting concrete skills, learning, a skilled trade, being immediately employable, and being able to grow from there. I mean, I would say the latter would be a better, if I had the choice between those two. So part of it is having those opportunities available. Part of it's also not having a stigma attached to people who choose a path other than college. So we've been very supportive of workforce education, and we'll continue to do that going forward. We also have been very involved in K through 12 across a wide variety of our K through 12. My budget this year, kind of our big proposal with education, is our teacher compensation. So we're going to go from Florida being 26 in the nation for minimum salary to number 2 in the nation for minimum salary for teachers. And that actually affects, I think, 60% of current teachers now. It's over 100,000, and it's not just in the school district, the public charter teachers as well get it. And so I think that'll be good for them. But I think also, if you're looking to recruit more people to go into this at a college, or even maybe with some workforce experience, having that better minimum salary makes it more attractive. So I think you'll end up seeing a difference by doing that. And we're also doing a bonus program for principals, and then a bonus program for, because they say, what about experienced teachers? Well, we have the biggest bonus program for teachers in Florida history that we're proposing. And so that's all within the context of a budget that's adding to reserves and reducing spending on a per capita basis. So that's really important. Last session, we were able to expand school choice in Florida more than it has ever been expanded. We had a program that had been very successful, but it had about 100,000 students and didn't really have an ability to go beyond that. And so we were able to take I think there were 17,000 kids on a waiting list. We were able to create a new scholarship, cleared that waiting list, and then obviously be able, to add students as the demand sees fit going forward. But that takes, low-income parents, mostly single mothers. The statistics, I think it's 70% of the students on the scholarship programs are either African American or Hispanic, and allowing that mother, most of the time it's a single mother, be able to make a choice as to what school is best for her kid or kids. And that would not be a choice she would be able to have on her own because of her income level. And so I think that that's something that has proven to be successful. I think the students who've gone through the program with scholarship have done better, more likely to go to college, more likely to graduate college. But I think also it's, there's certain intangible things when you're talking about which school is best for young kids, particularly if they're from, neighborhoods where there's a lot of problems where they can get off track. And yes, academics is important, but some of it is, what type of disciplines in the schools, are they wearing uniforms? Are they doing certain things that kind of foster success? And I've seen that. And, you've seen different folks who have a lot of experience in education craft pretty compelling programs for these kids. And there seems to be an increasing demand for it. So we think that that's good as well. We're also trying to, in this legislative session, remove barriers for success. And one of the things we can do in Florida is really roll back a very oppressive occupational licensing regime here in Florida, where you need a license to turn on a light switch sometimes in certain areas. It's just ridiculous. In fact, if you compare the number of things that you need licenses for here versus other states, New York and California don't even require licenses for a lot of the things that we require things for. You could go to a Marine sniper school and be qualified as a Marine sniper easier in terms of the time than you could to get a degree in interior design in the state of Florida. You need 2,400 hours just to be licensed to be able to do interior design. I had when we rolled this out earlier in the year, I had a lady who wanted to do hair braiding, and in order to do that, she's got to do 2,000 hours in cosmetology. And other states don't even require that. I mean, if people are willing to pay her to braid their hair, why can't she make a living doing that? And so we're basically taking away any type of licensure requirement that does not directly impact health, safety, and welfare of the public. If it's to create a guild or to limit competition, we're getting rid of that and making it these jobs and these professions more attainable for people. And I think that that's something that will ultimately pass the legislature, and it'll be something I'm able to sign. We're also going to be looking at all the licenses we have and the requirements, automatically attaching a sunset provision to them, so that if they're really good, if they're really important to protect, the public health, and I think for sure some are, then there'll be no problem for the legislature to reauthorize that every 5, 6, however many years you choose to do on that. But I think what we see is government tends to just get bigger if you don't do anything. It's there's regulations that happen. It's you got to figure out, they come from everywhere. In Washington, it was the worst because these agencies would churn out all kinds of regulations. I mean, you have a 100-page bill that could lead to 1,000 pages of regulations. And so if you did nothing, it seemed like government would always get bigger, and that was the default. I think the default should be if you do nothing, then government actually gets smaller because that means that we have more freedom and opportunity. So we'll look to do that as well. And then it was, I think, mentioned by Pat, we've got a lot of momentum on our efforts at environmental restoration. And I think the reason why it's been something that's been successful is because people in Florida understand the connection to things that our water resources have to things like our economic well-being. You have so many places that are contingent upon people wanting to come to Florida as tourists. We're the #1 fishing destination in the United States. We're the #1 boating destination in the United States. Obviously, we get 120, 130, I don't know what the number is going to be this year, but it's big in terms of tourists coming to the state of Florida. It's not all because of environment. I mean, obviously, we get a lot of people that come for the theme parks and other things, but it's a big part of it. And so property values, you name it. And so I think people understand that making sure we get that right is something that's not only the right thing to do, but it's something that really sets us up to be more successful going forward into the future. So we have continued progress on that front, and as well as some additional reforms that I think will make a big difference. And ultimately, if we're getting the big issues right, then I think we're going to be okay as a state. So I'm privileged to be able to serve as the governor. It's a lot more you can do as governor than as one of 435 in the Congress. And every time people that I serve with will ask me, say, "Oh man, we miss you up here," I tell them, I don't miss you. I mean, because I banged my head against the wall for 6 years. Why did I need to do that for another 2 years? And so it's just a difference between, and it's just interesting, the juxtaposition, seeing kind of what goes on up here versus where you can actually, I think, get some things done that really affect people's lives. So that's what we're doing. We're going to continue to work hard doing it. And we appreciate, your involvement in this process. And thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here. God bless everyone. Thank you.